I've been talking about this expanded revamp for years at this point, and looks like now it is finally going to be happening. Blizzard not only confirmed that a part of the Plaguelands is getting updated as a part of the base campaign for Midnight, but they, in another interview, soft confirmed their interest in returning to a few more classic zones and giving them a similar treatment. At the moment, Arathi Highlands, Tirisfal Glades with Undercity and Gilneas are the big candidates. Also, the Plaguelands might merge into one zone, and they may not even be called Plaguelands anymore, just how the ghostlands are not really a thing anymore. We could see this as just being former Lordaeron. So, what is everything we currently know? Let's look at the multiple official interviews from Blizzard and all the hints we currently have for the revamps. So you can actually play WoW directly on your phone with awesome this video sponsor. They just had a huge update and the app is better than it ever was. It's super easy to use, you just download it with my link in the description, PC and the phone app, and connect it. With the customized gamepad, you can check in on your characters anywhere with game sound. With the new update though, it got so much better with 4K and 8K support, desktop loading in less than a second, you can transfer files, open apps directly on the remote device, and you can use your device as a second screen. Furthermore, they optimized it so much that it works even on weaker networks, so it's much more stable. So check out my link in the description and use the new highly optimized and updated version of Awesome to play WoW on your phone, amongst other things. So this totally went under the radar, literally no one is talking about this for some reason, but Blizzard has literally outright told us they plan to rework more classic zones in the future. Now, as you may know, the Midnight expansion announcement was a bit of a mess, kinda all over the place. It took forever to figure out what exactly are even the features of this expansion and what is happening, even though Blizzard did actually officially give us like a summary a few days back. However, they did a really surprisingly important interview talking about Silvermoon being two-thirds neutral, faction conflicts happening soon, also about these new zones in a Spanish interview, and this completely slipped under the radar. I've been talking about this for years pretty much, since the World's Lost Saga announcement, that it isn't going to just be quel'thalas that is getting revamped. We did technically get two zones that are brand new, the Haranir zone related to the World Trees and the Void zone, and quel'thalas has kind of been bunched into one. It's no longer as many zones as it was back in TBC. However, as you know, we always get two more patch zones, like two major patch zones, and they have been pretty big recently. I mean, we got Undermine, which was a whole pretty well-developed city. We essentially got the whole planet of Karesh in the War Within. So something like just getting some tiny zone in 12.1 or 12.2 is not really going to be a thing. Now, if you missed this as well in another interview, one of the Blizzard devs actually confirmed that they're doing a return to the old zones as a part of the Arathi storyline right in the base expansion itself. They actually told us that Stratholm and Lightscope Chapel will be two new key areas that we will explore, and very likely they're getting updated as well, which are, as you may know, two main locations in the Eastern Plaguelands. Like, these are the two key locations. What is very important to keep in mind is that a big part of Midnight is going to be the fact that the Eastern Kingdoms are going to be seamless continent, which means you will be able to fly from the Plaguelands to quel'thalas and even around Silvermoon. To make this happen, of course, they need to modify the border areas. As you may know, Stratholm is right on the border itself and has this weird mist over it, and almost certainly they will have to either be removed or updated. Furthermore, with dragon riding, it makes sense to further optimize the areas when they're reworking them anyway to make it accessible. So this is actually kind of old news from about 2 weeks back. I actually made a full video on this where they confirmed that the Eastern Plaguelands will be getting updated, at least to a certain extent, in a campaign in the base expansion. So this is not even patch content or like minor patch content. This appears to be 12.0 stuff. This actually makes complete sense. The Plaguelands have been cleansed for years at this point. The Scourge is almost entirely gone and people have returned back to living in a way. They're not really even the Plaguelands anymore. Honestly, I could totally see Blizzard bunching up the East and the West Plaguelands and naming it, renaming it something like Old Lordaeron, as these are just two randomly named zones that are no longer relevant to the current storyline. Similar to how they plan to merge the old zones in quel'thalas just a bit further north, as we're no longer going to have ghostlands. And these ghostlands were never really an elven zone. I mean, they were called ghostlands because this was a consequence of the Scourge invasion. Literally the exact same reason we have two separate zones called Plaguelands. Previously, this was just called Lordaeron or Eastern Lordaeron. Now the big thing I want to talk about is that Blizzard did an interview with a Spanish creator and they told us this exactly. there are a lot of classic zones that the team would like to tell stories in, so we believe more zones will be reworked in the future. Honestly, I think these are pretty big news coming officially from Blizzard. Specifically, they mention classic zones. I'm not sure if the wording here was classic as in like old school zones, like classic zones, or literally WoW classic zones, but technically all the zones below quel'thalas are classic zones except Gilneas, and a bunch of them were slightly or more updated over the years. I honestly think this is a soft confirmation that we are in fact getting new zones in Midnight below the border of quel'thalas. Sure, they said the future, but we know that the Last Titan is a northern expansion. I honestly doubt we are going to get big updates to Kalimdor or the Eastern Kingdoms, maybe something related to the Sword of Sargeras, so honestly I think this is very likely talking about Midnight, which in turn means the very near future, like literally next year. Now, we actually have other hints to compare this with, and we have a long setup. I've been talking about this since Shadowlands, if you guys followed me for that long. I think I got over like a dozen videos talking about these revamps, but Blizzard has purposefully been setting the ground in most related zones below quel'thalas. Plaguelands, as I previously mentioned, has been set up since Cataclysm, with actually getting revamped, and we kinda returned like a few years back. The biggest changes recently happened with Gilneas and Tirisfal Glades, with pretty important questlines, and we just got a new questline a few months back in the Arathi Highlands. I don't necessarily think Hinterlands or Hillsbrad are going to be a big deal, but I think these three areas I just mentioned are going to be key. So, first we got Arathi Highlands, which are super relevant and related to, of course, the new Arathi Emperor, the Arathi Empire from the War Within. This is the center of their former empire, and these guys still consider themselves the Arathi Empire, and their capital is in the Highlands. To combine this with the most recent updates in BFA, where they literally just revamped the entire zone, and then kind of it was stuck in time, but then they made it super relevant with the recent questlines that happened in the War Within like just a few months back, I think this is the #1 zone that will be relevant. Not as in getting a revamped, as honestly it's kinda updated as is. It might only need a few adaptations, but it may even be a new big zone in Midnight itself. Now, two other very relevant zones are Tirisfal Glades and Gilneas. Keep in mind, both of these got two pretty major questlines in the past few years, and they actually completely cleansed Undercity that was previously plagued since BFA when Sylvanas did the entire thing. After that, we had the questline of the Forsaken claiming their new identity, fixing their beef with the Worgen they had. Now, they confirmed Sylvanas is actually returning at Midnight, which might make the Forsaken relevant, and we have some hints for the Forsaken Paladins, so a lot of things are pointing at the fact that Tirisfal Glades may be relevant, especially since, other than the Plaguelands, it is the closest zone to quel'thalas and may actually be affected by this massive void invasion. This is all on the Horde side of things. Now, on the Alliance side of things, we of course have Gilneas, which, as you may know, was recently returned to the Worgen after a really long time. Surprisingly enough, or not that surprisingly enough, they didn't really update the city that much. While it wasn't crazy outdated, as the Cataclysm architecture was pretty cool, it wasn't as outdated as classic stuff, the place is still a bit outdated. I mean, it's like 15 years old at this point. However, the important thing to keep in mind is that these two zones have been significantly set up with multiple large questlines setting the ground, and I feel like that is going to get picked up very soon. I can definitely see the Void Invasion expanding to these areas, which could give them a relevance. However, the gist of the matter is that Blizzard has confirmed their interest in returning to the classic zones, and they also confirmed that at the very least in the base expansion, a part of the Eastern Plaguelands is getting updated. Other than the Plaguelands, the three big candidates, as I said, are Tirisfal Glades, Gilneas, Arathi Highlands, and honestly, I don't think these zones will receive the quel'thalas treatment with everything being built from scratch in this grand new architecture, but parts of them could definitely be updated. I mean, these half parts of zones being updated could totally happen even in mini patches like 12.0.5, 12.0.7. However, as I said, we have two major ones. These will definitely require new zones. While we could still get the Arathi Empire, definitely in Midnight, and this continent that we could totally discover because we know they're an advanced civilization, we still have plenty more room for these zones returning. Realistically, since we went to Karesh and we don't really have all that many areas for Blizzard to give us in the context of Midnight. We already are going to a Void Zone, which is going to be in the base expansion, and I don't think they plan to do another out of this world Void void zones, as we just got Karesh in the war with him. It's unlikely we will get to a completely different planet like alternate Draenor, so really, most of Midnight will likely be grounded on Azeroth. Maybe some new undiscovered zone, maybe something related to the Emerald Nightmare in the surrounding areas. So, looks like the expanded revamp is happening. It's only a matter of time until we learn to what extent. Thank you for watching. Check out my video on the new Reese class combos by clicking on the screen, and check out my video on real world history that I've recorded about the Roman Empire live on site in Malta by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.